It was late afternoon when Caroline first noticed a figure standing at the edge of the woods. The trees swayed in the wind, and the fading light from the setting sun cast long, eerie shadows. Her house sat on the outskirts of a small town, far enough away from neighbors to feel isolated, yet not so far that she was completely alone. Caroline had always liked the solitude. It gave her space to think. But lately, things had started to feel off. Small things at first. A door that wouldn't stay closed, lights flickering when there was no reason for it. She chalked it up to her imagination or old wiring. But today, when she saw the figure standing motionless between the trees, something deep in her gut told her it was no coincidence. The figure was tall, unnaturally still, like a statue in the dying light. It didn't move, at least not at first. Caroline froze, her heart pounding in her chest. A strange chill washed over her, even though it was warm outside. She squinted, but the figure remained indistinguishable from the shadows around it. She stepped closer to the window, her breath shallow, her hands trembling as she gripped the sill. What was it? A person? Or something else? Her mind raced, running through possibilities, none of them comforting. As she continued to stare, the figure moved. Slowly, deliberately, it turned its head toward her. Caroline's breath caught in her throat. The eyes, black and hollow, locked onto hers. A cold, suffocating dread clamped around her chest. She stumbled back from the window, her pulse echoing in her ears. The figure didn't move from its spot in the woods, but she could still feel its gaze, heavy and relentless, pressing against her skin. Caroline ran to the door, but something stopped her. She froze in place, an overwhelming sense of fear washing over her. Why hadn't she left earlier? Why had she stayed? She turned, looking once again toward the woods. The figure was gone. Her hand shook uncontrollably as she closed the door and bolted it. But as she stepped back, she heard something, a whispering faint, like a voice calling her name. Caroline. It was soft at first, a mere breeze brushing her name, but then it grew louder, more distinct. It sounded like her mother, calling her in that familiar way, urging her to come closer. Her heart pounded even harder now. It was impossible. Her mother had passed away 2 years ago. Caroline, the voice was closer now. Too close. The hair on the back of her neck stood up as she felt something cold brush against her skin. She turned around, but the room was empty. She rushed to the door, but it wouldn't budge. The lock, tight and secure, had somehow jammed. Then, the whispers came again. Caroline, you shouldn't have looked. Now you'll never escape. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, as if the very walls of her house were closing in around her. Caroline pressed her back against the door, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The room was suffocating. It felt as though the air itself had thickened, as if something was waiting just beyond her vision, closing in on her every move. Caroline, you shouldn't have looked. Now you'll never escape. The voice was no longer just a whisper. It was a growl, deep and ominous, reverberating in the pit of her stomach. The sound seemed to echo off the walls, amplifying in the silence of her home. Her mind raced. She had to get out. She had to escape. The door was locked, and every window was securely shut. But Caroline could feel something else, a presence in the air pressing down on her, invading her space. She was no longer alone. Her eyes darted around the room, desperately searching for something, anything that could help. The shadows in the corners of the room began to shift, twisting in unnatural ways, stretching toward her like dark, tendrilled hands. Caroline stumbled backward, her legs buckling beneath her. The room felt alive, suffocating, like the very walls were closing in on her. She could hear the faint sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, as if someone was walking through the house. But no one was there. The whispers were now a constant hum in her ears, a maddening, continuous sound. She felt dizzy, as if the world around her was spinning out of control. Her hands shook uncontrollably, as she reached for the phone in her pocket. But when she unlocked it, the screen remained black. The battery had died, just as everything else had. Then the floor creaked. Caroline froze. She didn't dare to breathe, her heart pounding in her chest. The footsteps were closer now, each one heavy, deliberate, echoing in the otherwise silent house. The door behind her rattled again. It was still locked, but the pressure on the other side was undeniable. Something was pushing against it. And then, as if in answer to the growing tension, the door creaked open, slowly, almost painfully. The shadows in the room seemed to deepen, spreading across the walls like ink in water. The presence that had been lurking was now at the threshold. Caroline turned, her eyes wide with terror, and there, standing in the doorway, was a figure. It was no longer just a silhouette. It was a man, tall, skeletal, with eyes that were black pits, voids that seemed to suck the very light from the room. He was smiling, but there was no warmth in it, just a cold, empty grin of something predatory. "You should have stayed inside," the figure rasped, its voice low, its tone venomous. "Now, it's too late." Caroline backed away, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Her mind screamed for her to run, but her body refused to move. The figure stepped into the room, its presence overwhelming. The temperature dropped, and her skin prickled with cold. She tried to scream, but the sound was swallowed by the oppressive silence. The figure's grin widened, its eyes gleaming with malice as it stepped closer, each movement slow, deliberate. "Caroline," it whispered, its voice like a dark lullaby. "You're never going to leave. You've seen too much. Now, you're mine." The room seemed to close in on her, the shadows growing thicker, the walls pressing in. The last thing Caroline felt was the icy cold of the figure's touch as it reached out for her, pulling her into the darkness. Caroline's world was swallowed by darkness, a deep, suffocating blackness that wrapped itself around her like a blanket. Her body felt frozen, her limbs paralyzed, as if her very soul had been drained. She tried to scream, but no sound escaped her lips. The weight of the darkness pressed down on her chest, making it impossible to breathe. She was somewhere, but nowhere all at once, trapped in a void that had no beginning or end. The faint whispering that had haunted her home now turned into a chorus of voices, each one more sinister than the last. They spoke in tongues, their words unintelligible, but the tone was unmistakable, an overwhelming sense of dread that seeped into her very being. And then she saw it, a flicker of movement, a silhouette standing in the distance. It was the same figure, the tall, skeletal man, his face still hidden in shadows, his eyes two dark voids that seemed to pierce into her very soul. Caroline tried to move, but her body wouldn't respond. She was trapped in place, a prisoner in her own mind. The figure began to move toward her, its steps slow and deliberate, each one echoing in the vast emptiness. With every step, the darkness seemed to grow thicker, more oppressive. Caroline's heart raced as the figure came closer, its grin widening, its eyes gleaming with malevolent joy. "You're not going anywhere." The figure's voice rasped, a sickly, chilling sound that made Caroline's blood run cold. "You should have known better than to try and escape. This place, this world, it's mine. And now, so are you?" Caroline's mind spun. She had to break free. She had to get out. But how? She searched desperately for a way out, but the more she looked, the more the darkness seemed to close in around her, tightening its grip. There was no door, no window, just an endless, suffocating blackness that swallowed everything in its path. And then something shifted. The darkness parted, just for a moment, revealing a faint light in the distance. It was soft, flickering like a dying flame, but it was enough to give her hope. She had to reach it. She had to escape. Summoning every ounce of strength she had, Caroline forced herself to move. Her legs felt like lead, but she pushed forward, step by agonizing step, toward the flickering light. The figure behind her was silent now, but she could feel its eyes on her, watching, waiting for her to fail. As she moved closer to the light, the whispers grew louder, more frantic, as though the darkness itself was trying to pull her back, to drag her into its depths. But Caroline didn't stop. She couldn't stop. The light was so close now, just within reach. But then, a hand shot out from the shadows, grabbing her ankle with a vice-like grip. Caroline screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the darkness. She struggled, kicking and thrashing, but the hand wouldn't let go. It was cold, ice cold, and as it pulled her back, she felt the darkness closing in around her once more. "No!" she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I can't go back." The figure was there, looming over her, its face now visible, its eyes hollow and empty, its smile grotesque and mocking. It pulled her toward it, slowly, methodically, like a predator savoring its prey. "You're mine," it whispered, its voice dripping with malice. "You belong to the dark now." And with that, Caroline's world went black once more. Caroline's chest heaved as she tried to inhale, but no air filled her lungs. The darkness around her felt alive, writhing, crawling, suffocating her from all sides. It was as though the very air had thickened. Each breath she took a struggle against an invisible force. The cold hand still clutched her ankle, pulling her deeper into the void, dragging her further from the light that had been her only hope. Her heart pounded in her ears, the sound deafening in the silence of the darkness. The figure above her loomed, its hollow eyes staring down at her with a twisted satisfaction. Caroline's mind raced, searching desperately for a way out, for something, anything, that could break this nightmare. The hand that held her ankle was unrelenting, its grip stronger than steel, colder than death itself. Caroline's skin crawled as the fingers tightened around her, sending waves of ice through her body. She could feel the pull of the darkness growing stronger, its invisible tendrils wrapping around her, dragging her deeper into the abyss. "Let go of me!" Caroline screamed, her voice hoarse and desperate. But her words were met with a low, guttural laugh from the figure above her. The laughter echoed, bouncing off the walls of the void, growing louder, more menacing with every passing second. Caroline's body trembled as she stared into the empty eyes of the figure, her mind screaming in terror, but no words could escape her lips. "You thought you could escape," it said, its voice cold and mocking. "But there is no escape from me. No escape from this place." Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet shifted, like the very earth had come alive. Caroline's stomach churned as she felt herself being pulled further down, deeper into the darkness. She fought against the force, kicking, clawing, but it was like trying to fight a flood that had already consumed everything in its path. The figure's grin widened, its teeth sharp and jagged like broken glass. Its shadow stretched out around her, darkening every inch of the space. Caroline could feel its cold breath on her face, the foul stench of death filling her nostrils. It leaned closer, its face just inches from hers, its hollow eyes glowing with malice. "You belong here," it whispered, the words sending a chill down her spine. "You belong to the dark now." Caroline's mind reeled, her heart threatening to burst from her chest. She had to escape. She had to survive. But the darkness was closing in, tightening around her like a vice, and she could feel herself slipping away. In the distance, she saw it again, the faint flicker of light. It was weak, barely visible, but it was there. It was the only thing that could save her, the only thing that could pull her back from the brink of oblivion. With every ounce of strength left in her, Caroline lunged toward the light, her hands reaching out, desperate to grasp hold of it. The darkness screamed in fury, the whispers growing louder, more frantic as she moved. The figure snarled, its hand shooting out to grab her, but she was too fast, too desperate. Just as her fingers brushed against the light, she felt a sharp pain in her chest, like 1,000 needles piercing her skin. The darkness clawed at her, the hand of the figure gripping her wrist with enough force to break bones. But Caroline didn't stop. She wouldn't stop. And then in that moment, everything went silent. The light enveloped her, blinding and pure, its warmth radiating through her, burning away the cold, suffocating grip of the darkness. For a moment, she felt weightless, free, like she was floating above everything. But the relief was short-lived. The figure's hand was still clutching her, its grip unyielding, pulling her back into the abyss. "No!" Caroline whispered, her voice trembling as the darkness closed in once more. Caroline's world spun as the figure's icy grip tightened around her wrist, pulling her back into the suffocating blackness. The light that had briefly given her hope flickered, and she felt herself being dragged further into the void, the darkness swallowing her whole. The coldness around her was unbearable, like 1,000 jagged ice shards cutting through her flesh. Her breaths were shallow, panic rising in her chest as she struggled against the pull. The light was slipping away, the warmth it offered fading into nothingness. She was sinking deeper, her mind unraveling with each passing second. The whispers returned, louder than ever, their cruel voices wrapping around her like chains, tightening with every word. "You can never leave," the figure growled in her ear, its breath icy against her skin. "You belong to me now, Caroline. Forever." The words echoed in her mind, reverberating through her skull like a drumbeat. She wanted to scream, wanted to fight, but the energy drained from her with every breath. It was as though her body was becoming one with the darkness, her strength fading away. Desperation clawed at her, and suddenly, an idea flickered in her mind. She remembered the journal she had found earlier, the one that spoke of the entity, the Watcher in the dark. It had said that it fed on fear, that it thrived on the terror of its victims. And Caroline had been terrified, paralyzed by the overwhelming presence of the creature. But what if fear was the key to her escape, summoning the last of her strength? Caroline closed her eyes and let the fear surge within her. She allowed herself to feel the terror that had consumed her since the moment she had entered this nightmare. She let the fear consume her, letting it flood her heart, her mind, her very soul. She would not hide from it. She would embrace it. The figure above her paused, its grip faltering as it sensed a shift. Caroline's fear had become palpable, a dark, suffocating presence that even it could not ignore. The creature recoiled, its hollow eyes narrowing in confusion and anger. Caroline opened her eyes, the terror now a raging storm inside her. She no longer feared it. She understood it, and in that moment, she knew what she had to do. With a primal scream, Caroline tore herself free from the figure's grip. The darkness around her screamed in protest, the whispers growing frantic, but she pushed forward, her determination blazing brighter than any fear she had ever felt. She surged toward the light once more, her body moving on instinct, driven by a force greater than fear itself. The figure reached out in vain, its claws scraping through the air, but it was too late. Caroline reached the light and was engulfed in its warmth. The darkness howled, its presence fading as the light consumed it, burning it away piece by piece. For a moment there was nothing, just silence. The weight of the darkness lifted, and Caroline felt herself being pulled upward, as though the light was lifting her from the abyss. She had escaped. Her body shook as she collapsed to the ground, the world around her shifting as the void melted away. The suffocating cold was gone, replaced by the comforting warmth of the real world. The once terrifying figure was gone, vanished into nothingness, its presence a mere memory. But Caroline knew this wasn't over. She had survived, yes, but she understood now that the darkness would always be watching, waiting for her to slip again. The Watcher in the dark was not finished with her, and it would return. It always did. With trembling hands, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the journal she had found earlier. She read the final words once more. The Watcher never leaves. It is always watching, and it will wait for you to fall. Caroline looked up at the darkened sky, her heart heavy with the knowledge that the battle was far from over. The Watcher was still out there, and it would find her again. But she would be ready. She had survived the darkness once before, and she would survive it again. End of the story.